talking about the idea of a first-generation settlement. This is a settlement where man lives in close contact with nature and purely is dependent on it. And we then see the second-generation city. This is the industrial city, where the relationship with nature is hostile and defensive, or solely abusive. And what we're experiencing now is a third-generation city, a question of what we are looking for answers to at the moment. So many post-industrial cities in the West suffer from an abundance of decommissioned industrial buildings. Cities such as the post-industrial U.S. cities of Detroit and Buffalo have taken on the pathways of mass demolition in an effort to cleanse the city of post-industrial waste. So instead of reducing the industrial structures, a way forward may be the reintroduction of natural elements to generate an organic synthesis within the urban environment. The third generation of a city represents the opportunity to form a harmony between the urban ruin and nature. So this paper presents a history of the urban environment from the 1960s onwards, with an objective of defining ways and exploring models for the reintroduction of nature into post-industrialized urban structures. Through observations and case studies, we're going to provide a basis of understanding to the current application of nature in urban settings, and then we will draw on theoretical constructs, we'll review some urban theories, architectural proposals, and bio-inspired approaches, and within the framework of sustainability and observation, we will come to an understanding of different usages and stages of repurposed post-industrial environments to provide a foundation for future application. So I'll give a brief history of urban repurposing from the 60s. In the 1960s, we see architects and developers recognizing the destructive effects that suburbia and subsequently the suburban enclosed shopping malls were having on downtown areas of cities. And designers at this time, namely Victor Gruen, who was credited with being the father of the enclosed shopping mall, proposed moving the suburban mall concept to the inner city as a solution for urban decay. So one of the first projects to attempt this was Midtown Plaza, a slide I have up there now. And this was a shopping mall created in downtown Rochester that had suffered from the movement of people to suburbia. And the project, developed by Victor Gruen in conjunction with the department store McCurdy's and Foreman's, was an example of development that enforced itself on the environment rather than the environment around it providing inspiration. And the mall, which officially opened in 1962, was created by the demolition of several city blocks. Significant historic buildings in the core of Rochester replaced by this mute modernist concrete and glass structure that dominated the streetscape. Making a shopping mall in the urban environment seemed quite viable during this period, and there was another concept that was explored, which was the concept of outdoor pedestrian malls. Although these two developments had proved popular during the time period, after 10 years they started to decline again, and they failed to attract steady numbers, and suburbia had effectively compartmentalized society. The middle and upper classes were living and working in the suburbs. The poor remained in the city core. Downtown malls were perceived as dangerous, and people stopped going. And also, these types of developments failed to revitalize downtown areas as they did not provide an adequate appeal to push the suburbanite back into the city. So another concept came about this period, which was repurposing historic buildings into shopping malls, and this was proposed throughout the 60s and continued into the 80s. An example of this type of repurposing can be attributed to William Ross' 1960s redevelopment of the historic Ghirardelli chocolate factory in San Francisco as a shopping mall. So another example, a highly successful example of this, is the example of Faneuil Hall. It functioned as a marketplace and meeting hall since 1972, but had fallen into disrepair during the period of suburban growth in the 50s and 60s. So Roos's vision of urban renewal was a triumph in retail development. Faneuil Hall created a meeting point and a social space for the office workers and a tourist destination of international repute. And it really saved the declining downtown area of central Boston. So like the typical enclosed shopping malls in suburbia, both the Ghirardelli Square and Faneuil Hall are centrally controlled spaces. They have retail tenants and interior treatments specially selected by developers. Though the centers exhibit many characteristics of the mall, the essential difference is the lack of department stores and more specialty and tourist-based characters of these environments. So because of these characteristics, it's called a festival marketplace. And based on the success of Faneuil Hall, the festival marketplace was replicated in many urban centers. It achieved a relative longevity that the Gruen urban redevelopment projects failed to achieve. However, currently, many of these festival marketplaces have succumbed to a similar fate as Gruen's Midtown Plaza. The main problem with these festival marketplaces is they do not offer the same genuine community aspect of the historic marketplace or icons that they have replaced. Essentially, the festival marketplace is a consumer space masked by the guise of historical architecture. It doesn't really do much to form a genuine community. One example of the deterioration of a festival marketplace can be seen in New York's South Street Seaport. Its market proved too narrow, its attractions too weak to lure New Yorkers, explains Alexandria Lange from the Design Observer. Locals don't need cafe chairs, but a real lawn. They don't need picturesque fruit stands, but a real farmer's market. It needs to feel as if work is going on, not as if the architecture is merely a false front. So Lange explains that what urbanites seek most is a true sense of community and not a fake. What the neighborhood needs is the amenities it currently lacks. The festival marketplace pretends to be a neighborhood while really trying to create a fancier, more contemporary tourist trap.
So, as understood in this paper, natural repurposing can be defined as the adaptive reuse and repurposing of an object or space through the use of nature. It can be understood as a link between nature and design, and also design for sustainability. Nature and design is found in many ways as a source of inspiration for concepts, forms, functions, processes, and systems. From Art Nouveau and organic design to current biomimicry and biophilic design, nature plays an important role for designers. There are several concepts that are very important. For example, biophilia comes from the Greek bios, life, and philos, loving or beloved. In short, biophilia means a love for life or living systems. It was originally a word coined by German social psychologist Erich Fromm around 1965. Another very important concept is biomimicry. Biomimicry, again from the Greek bios, life, and mimesis, imitation, is imitation of life. And its aim is to achieve innovation inspired by nature. Biomimicry is a design discipline that studies nature's best ideas and then imitates these designs and processes to solve human problems. The core idea is that nature has already solved many of the problems we are grappling with. With this same logic, we find Janine Benio's work, Biomimicry, and she has defined different levels of biomimicry in what she calls shallow biomimicry or deep biomimicry. And here we have tried to visualize this in this chart. For Janine Benio's, the first level of biomimicry is imitation of form. As designers, we have translated this visually as we see in the upper band, with examples from Art Nouveau, Art Deco, organic design and organicism, or biomorphism. Then we can see imitation of natural processes, or we are also looking at imitation of function in nature. In this idea of imitation of function from nature, we usually have technological innovations, which can be inventions, the development of new technologies such as aviation, robotics, new materials, etc. Finally, in the lower band, we find imitation of natural processes and ecosystems. And here we find examples like landscape architecture, the development of garden cities, metabolic architecture, where we've established analogies from nature and we apply it to the design of systems, cities, and environment. In summary, we can find different types of approaches of bio-inspired design. On one hand, we have engineering and inventions, and we have bionics, biomechanics, biomimetics, and it's basically imitation of function. Then we have bio-inspired architecture and design, with periods of the history of design as Art Nouveau, the organicism of the 50s, aerodynamism, and the block jets of the 1990s, where we imitate form. We also imitate processes as organic architecture or metabolic architecture. And finally, we're striving to imitate processes and ecosystems. Now we will continue with other case studies.
So this is an example here. This is Treasure Hill in Taiwan. It's an exemplar of this. It's a community created by urban farmers, Kuomintang veterans who fled mainland China in the 40s Communist Revolution. The farmers settled in dilapidated terraced apartment buildings on the outskirts of Taipei and created a symbiotic relationship with the buildings and nature, recreating a farming community in an urban setting. Treasure Hill is a famous spot in Taipei and one of the New York Times must-see destinations since Casa Grande. It's a total ruin with jungle, farms, and people sharing the same spot. So the concept of a modern ruin as a means to address post-industriality has been embraced by the Ruin Academy, also in Taipei. The Ruin Academy is housed in a 5-story abandoned apartment building in Taipei. It's an attempt to rethink the industrialized city and the modern man in a box. In the post-World War II 5-story concrete building, interior walls and windows have been removed in order to grow bamboo and vegetables in the house, and 6-inch holes have been drilled into the walls to let rain inside. The basement is laid with topsoil, allows trees and vegetation to grow. Professors and students live and work inside the building in mahogany dormitories. The underlying premise of the academy, a joint venture between Casa Grande Laboratory in Finland and the JUT Foundation of the Arts and Architecture in Taiwan, is a return to nature. A similar repurposing can be seen in the High Line of Lower Manhattan. The High Line project saw the repurposing of a disused elevated railway line into a popular urban garden walkway. A strip of elevated railroad on Manhattan's west side, it runs from 34th Street to 12th Avenue and Gansworth Street in the Meatpacking District. It is a treasure now mostly because of the structure that time forgot, says Philip Connors of the Wall Street Journal. The High Line opened in 2009, is run by the City of New York's Public Parks Association, and it functions as a highly popular community-minded space. City residents note that when the city demolishes properties, they don't plant grass, they don't plant trees, it's just a big scar. So instead of empty offices and wastelands, an alternative vision for the city, proposed by Stephen Vogel, is a return to primary industries. Vogel proposes the use of cleared land to be used for wind farms, communal housing, grazing land, and dairies. One way to describe it is romantic utopianism, people returning to their own self-reliance to create a living community. And while this is only a concept, many community members have latched onto the ethos of the project, and the small-scale sustainable developments are taking place all over cities, as you can see in this slide.
Thank you, Lisa. So we will speak about a project that we're currently developing, Odgers Lane Repurposing Project, to come to some conclusions for this paper. So this project is in a courtyard known as Odgers Lane in Canberra, Australia, and it is a public space which is being revitalized through the common effort of different stakeholders. The aim is to create a new urban space through architectural, design, and art interventions with participation of specialized teams in the community. This interdisciplinary project brings together designers and artists, mainly from landscape architecture, literature, industrial design, and graphic design. We are approaching the project as an interaction between space, text, and object, and draw upon critical knowledge of past and current attempts to meld these three properties in urban space in capital cities worldwide. The evolution of this collaborative project has incorporated diverse artistic proposals as well as some ideas about natural repurposing as described in this paper, with the aim of turning an unused urban site into a new and fresh area for that community. So, in conclusion, the transformation of our cities and urban environments is a dynamic ongoing process comparable to the evolution of species in nature. In a time where our cities and society are being rethought of in view of the problems generated by industrial paradigms, many diverse attempts to incorporate nature into the built environment are found. The city, a product of the industrial society where big human populations settled according to new work opportunities in factories, is evolving to a post-industrial space. An alternative to clearing away old and unused commercial or industrial places comes with repurposing, where objects and spaces acquire new meaning and provide new uses and experiences through adaptations of the existing environments. In this repurposing process, nature has different roles. From decorative gardens to projects in which natural elements are the core of the design, nature is present in today's urban repurposing. We can find projects in which nature is planned, as is the case of urban farming and the entertainment spaces of urban parks, or also cases where the nature is more random and it grows freely, affecting the space randomly, as in the case of the Ruin Academy. The relationship between nature and design has been widely explored in terms of form, function, process, and systems from nature. Today, approaches like biomimicry, innovation inspired by nature, or biophilic design, based on the biophilia theory, which argues that human beings are genetically hardwired to appreciate nature, are being widely explored, in view of the current environmental awareness and needs. Natural repurposing, understood here as the use of nature to repurpose industrial spaces or products, can be a valid tool within design for sustainability objectives, and more experimentation and research is necessary in order to construct the third generation city.